by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Laura, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the April 19th issue of the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Resist assuming her life is like her books. The British author Gwendolyn Riley may be as emotionally guarded as the women in her novels, which have caught on in America. By Thessaly LaForce. Like many of the narrators in her books, the British writer Gwendolyn Riley is a vegan. She was raised by a working-class single mother and grew up mainly in the northwest of England. She is obsessed with the musician Morrissey. Her last two novels, First Love and My Phantoms, are quick sketches of abuse and misery in domestic settings. They are told with precision and an ear for dialogue. Because of that, it is tempting to try and piece together details of Miss Riley's life from her writing. I bet, Miss Riley said. I'll just say, resist. It was a spring afternoon, and Miss Riley, a slender 47-year-old woman with her hair pulled into a knot at the nape of her neck, was walking briskly along Cheyenne Walk by the River Thames. We had agreed to meet at the bronze statue of Sir Thomas More, whom, Miss Riley reminded me, King Henry VIII had taken downriver and chopped off his head. She began her career in her native England as a bit of a wonderkin, publishing her first book at 22 and following it up with 7 more. A couple had been published over a decade ago in the United States, but it wasn't until 2022, when the New York Review Book Classics published My Phantoms, about a fraught mother-daughter relationship, and First Love, a taut story of a crumbling marriage, that she found a new, enthusiastic American audience, mostly composed of stylish, literary-minded women, who may have imagined her as a shrewd but sympathetic friend with whom they could gab about their love lives over a dry martini, or two. Yet the novels contain themes not totally befitting of cocktail conversation. The book is depressing as hell, but impossible to turn away from, the blogger and novelist Emily Gould wrote of My Phantoms in The Cut 2024. In an email, the author Sheila Heti explained Miss Riley's appeal this way. Her vision is very uncompromising, and her view of the world is very bleak, very un-American, not pleasing and hopeful and warm-hearted. But she's not fashionably ironic or jaded either, and the books don't seem contemporary somehow. The language of Miss Riley's sharply observant, emotionally guarded female narrators is not the language of right now, Miss Heti added, and all of this is exciting. She tells the truth in her own way, and many writers don't tell the truth, and if they do, they don't tell it in their own way. With her new novel, The Palm House, Miss Riley wanted to step outside the domestic sphere. The novel traces the drama of a highbrow magazine of ideas whose new editor-in-chief wants to be a sort of London version of The New Yorker. It's told from the perspective of a writer named Laura, whose closest work friend is an older man, Edmund, the deputy editor, who has resigned in opposition to the new regime. Their tender encounters are interspersed with scenes from Laura's youth, involving Laura's distant relationship with her mother. Ms. Riley was partly inspired, she told me, by Penelope Fitzgerald's 1979 Booker Prize-winning novel Offshore, a drama in miniature set among a cluster of houseboats. I wanted a little collection of people working somewhere, she said, doing something that's a bit under siege, or Nazi bombardment, or a bad editor. Miss Riley was once married to the English poet Alan Jenkins, who was the deputy editor of the Times Literary Supplement until 2020. They divorced in 2023. Like Laura, she lives in Ravenscourt Park. She wakes up, has coffee, and writes. I can't think of a way to make that other than this, she said. Yeah, I do those things. Miss Riley mumbles, extracting personal details from her requires persistence. I'm not telling you, she said when she asked if she had ever undergone psychoanalysis, asked about the term autofiction, And if it applied to her deeply realistic writing, she said, "That phrase is kind of old-fashioned now, isn't it?" Much of the Palm House is set on the south bank of the Thames, which we had now reached in our walk, and where the fictional magazine offices are based. We approached the famous Globe Theatre. Miss Riley is a part of a film club. Had she seen Hamnet? I cannot imagine anything more ignominious than watching Hamnet, Miss Riley said. The Palm House opens with Laura and Edmund eating salt and vinegar crisps at the Anchor, a pub near the Globe. From the street, Miss Riley pointed to the room where she imagined her two main characters sitting. "Except I didn't have that large television," she said, referring to a screen mounted to the wall. Writing for Miss Riley is both straightforward and a little bit mysterious. "Animal instinct, honestly," she said. "I found out the other day that beavers can't stand the sound of running water. Beaverism. It's what I am. I just do my thing and then do it again." She tinkers until she said, "Something will sound right," and then it will still sound right the next morning. She was always drawn towards books. "It's what there was to do," she said. In Opposed Positions, her 2012 book about a young female writer adrift, the narrator's mother remembers her daughter triumphantly reading a book at age 2. As a child, Miss Riley was always writing or scribbling in the margins. "I'll still find old books that I had things to say about 30, 40 years ago," she said. She loved the Brontes, Thomas Hardy, the obvious ones. Twice she stopped herself mid-thought when talking about herself and asked me not to include what she had just said. "I just lie," she said. "It's amazing how easy it is to just lie and come out with something that's facile." We were now near Southwark Bridge, and we were discussing what I found to be the most disturbing scene of the new novel, placed there by Miss Riley with a disarming sang-froid. It involved a flashback showing her narrator, Laura, visiting the home of an older, much older, famous stand-up comedian who invites her to London. He does a line of cocaine, takes her to his bedroom, Miss Riley writes. Then I was to get undressed. In my confusion, I managed to leave my tights and shoes on, which he found irritating. I must have looked ridiculous. As we strode through the crowds of tourists and passers-by, I asked her about it. I think I was showing how, similar to this editor arriving out of nowhere and just spoiling everything, no one speaks to her, Miss Riley said. Her mother talks past her or announces things. No one speaks to her. She's got no one, no affection. She sees someone on the television who she thinks would understand them, right? So it's terrific bad luck that he's a very wicked person. Miss Riley paused. It's an old-fashioned phrase, but I wanted to show that she's in a man's world all the way through the book. These kinds of things happen to most women at some point, if not as teenagers, then as adults, or to someone they know. At the end of our walk, we reached a cheerful vegan restaurant for dinner. Miss Riley fidgeted as I asked more questions. Book titles. A shocked expression crosses her face. Of course she comes up with them herself. Does she write to music? No. Total silence. Total silence. Except for the 8 lanes of traffic outside my flat. She became flustered after more questions. I don't know what to say. Sounds good. Sounds good. I don't know what to say. I reached to switch off the recorder on my phone. Her face visibly relaxed. Please turn it off, she said. Don't do me dirty. At Coachella's, LA's beloved puppets make their debut. After years of struggling to keep the doors open, the Bob Baker Marionette Theater joined a lineup that included Justin Bieber and Cat's Eye by Juno Carmel. Last Friday afternoon, as temperatures climbed into the 80s in the dusty California desert, fans rushed to claim a spot in front of a Coachella stage. But the crowd wasn't camping out for that night's headliner, Sabrina Carpenter, or for the buzzy girl group Cat's Eye. Attendees were patiently waiting to see Bob Baker Marionette Theater, home to some of Los Angeles' most popular puppets. Derek Moe, 31, was kicking off his first year at Coachella at the front of the crowd. Even with a stacked weekend of performances, he had a feeling that the puppet show would be hard to top. His partner, Talissa Topacchio, was also brimming with excitement. They had watched their first show at the Puppet Theater, a Winter Wonderland special a few months earlier. "I've always wanted to go, but I'd never just, done it," Miss Topacchio, the 28, said. "It was the most amazing thing I've seen in my life." As one of the largest and longest-running puppet theaters in the United States, the group is a beloved Los Angeles institution with 10 full-time staff members and 10 to 25 puppeteers, depending on the season. Mary Fago, 53, co-executive director of the theater, said that joining the Coachella lineup felt natural. "We were like, of course you're reaching out to us," Miss Fago said with a laugh. "Coachella needs us to bring the real and the connected and the joy and the fun and the sense of not taking yourself too seriously." Bob Baker, the puppeteer, whom the theater was named for, was born in Los Angeles in 1924. He saw his first puppet show at 6 and immediately threw himself into learning the art form. After years of studying puppetry, he teamed up with Alton Wood, a puppeteer and pianist, in the late 1940s, to create a touring company that performed at schools and churches. By 1963, the duo had transformed a run-down movie scenery shop near downtown Los Angeles into Bob Baker Marionette Theater. Now based in the Highland Park neighborhood of Los Angeles, the theater has a trove of roughly 3,000 handmade puppets and performs up to 6 shows every weekend. The theater's traveling company, which takes a marionette-adorned van to schools and special events around California, will return to the desert again this Friday to perform during Coachella's second weekend. The theater has also hosted an annual Bob Baker Day every year since Mr. Baker's death in 2014. In recent years, around 35,000 people have turned out for the free event at Los Angeles State Historic Park near Chinatown. Although the event typically falls during the first weekend of Coachella in April, a rain forecast pushed this year's Bob Baker Day to September 20th. The theater performs in the cabaret style, which means the puppeteer is visible to the audience. The group uses all kinds of creatures, among them hand and rod puppets, think the Muppets, and shadow puppets. Its specialty is marionettes, which are controlled by strings or wires from above. You see the strings, you see how it's made, yet you still kind of look at it and believe it's a dog, said Alex Evans, 38, the other co-executive director and the theater's artistic director. With an eager crowd gathered at the festival stage, Pink Cat, a Vegas showgirl-style MC, welcomed an assortment of clowns, fairies, and instruments for a puppet review. Babies rode on parents' shoulders next to people in full clown outfits and makeup. Heavily tattooed millennials mingled with Gen Zers with neon-dyed hair and Instagram-ready festival outfits. "We opened up the pit for Bob Baker Marionette Theater," Miss Topacchio said, referring to the way people mosh at hardcore shows. Meg Hope, 33, and her husband, Jeff Williams, 42, were in the crowd with their children, Cassidy, 2, and Calliope, 1. The couple had traveled from Christchurch, New Zealand to Coachella for 10 years, and their children started attending the festival last year. "As soon as we saw Bob Baker was on there, we were like, what a perfect place for our first puppet show," Miss Hope said. "It's so nice to see marionettes and puppets getting their own space. It's a tough time to be niche." It was also a major moment for the theater, which has faced the prospect of closure several times over the past few decades. The original theater, a cinder block building near downtown Los Angeles, faced foreclosure in 2008, and Mr. Baker sold it to developers in 2013, a year before his death. The group continued to perform in that space until late 2018, when it was finally evicted. It became a nonprofit theater and moved into the York Theater in Highland Park by the end of 2019. Then COVID shut down performances, and the board began a campaign to ask the community for the $365,000 that it needed to keep the theater afloat for another year. We had it in about 3 weeks, Miss Fego said. And that was not private solicitation conversations with major donors. That was people showing up with $25 and $50. As vaccines rolled out, volunteers painted the murals and the proscenium that are seen today, and the theater reopened for performances in July 2021. This week, Bob Baker Marionette Theater started a campaign to raise $7 million to purchase and restore the York Theater, which has become a neighborhood staple. The group opened the campaign to the public after raising $4.5 million from arts foundations, and it hopes to raise the rest so the location become a forever home, Ms. Fego said. In recent years, the group has received requests to make puppets for all kinds of special events, including a Kendrick Lamar ventriloquist dummy for Mr. Lamar's Big Steppings tour. The theater also gets plenty of inquiries to host weddings, performances, and occasionally funerals. We get so many crazy phone calls, Mr. Evans said. Like, are you guys interested in this project? Or could you do a show here? And the answer's never no. Daisy Hernandez, 29, started working at Bob Baker Marionette Theater as a spotlight operator around 2014 and quickly began to train with puppets. Though the Coachella performance wasn't too different from what the theater usually does at home, the occasion offered a reminder that the troupe was in a better place these days. I think that's the only thing that really changed. We're now stable, Ms. Hernandez said. But the one thing that never changed from beginning to end was just everyone's commitment and love for puppetry and the passion to keep the theater alive. At Coachella, she's puppeteering many characters, including a drum, Frankenstein's monster, and a little elf who performs Ben Platt's cover of Addison Rae's Diet Pepsi. More than 100 puppets appeared in the group's first Coachella set, which included nods to plenty of the buzzy artists who were playing at the festival this year. Succulent plant puppets danced to a song by Karol G, and alien puppets performed a cover of Soda Pop from the movie K-Pop Demon Hunters. "Allow me to introduce Geese," Pink Cat said between musical numbers, referring to the popular rock band. When several goose-shaped puppets waddled onto the stage, the crowd roared with laughter. When we were at the old space struggling, we would do shows for 5 people and still make it, like the best show ever, Ms. Hernandez said after the theater's first Coachella performance. And now here we are performing for millions of people, streaming and live. It was a surreal moment. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Why fashion suddenly loves older women? Representation of women of a certain age has never been higher. What's going on? By Vanessa Friedman. This month, Vogue did something it had never done before, something most people thought it would probably never do. It put 2 76-year-old women on its cover. Sure, they weren't just any 76-year-olds. They were Meryl Streep and the Vogue overseer Anna Wintour. And they were there in a meta way to discuss the mythology around The Devil Wears Prada 2, in which Miss Streep plays a version of Miss Wintour, but still 76. Actually groundbreaking, went one comment on the magazine's Instagram post. The irony is that in breaching the age barrier, Vogue actually made itself seem not old, but of the moment. These days, as Miss Wintour wrote in the magazine, I feel age is actually an advantage, or so it is beginning to seem in fashion. The most recent round of fashion shows, which ended last month, were notable not only for the almost total lack of size diversity on the runway, but also for the fact that they were at the same time taking one giant step forward when it came to another aspect of inclusivity: age. The Chanel show opened with 50-year-old Stephanie Cavalli, who was one of 15 models over 40 on the runway, Bottega Veneta, and 9 older models, Tom Ford, 9 women and men, Givenchy 8, Balenciaga 5, Louis Vuitton 4. And this isn't counting the famous older models like 52-year-old Kate Moss, who appeared on the Gucci runway, 57-year-old Gillian Anderson, who closed Miu Miu, and the 7 art world insiders, including 79-year-old Ming Smith and 52-year-old Amy Sherald, who walked at Carolina Herrera. Put another way, according to data from the fashion search engine Tagwalk, 5% of the top 20 brands included at least one curve or plus-size model on their runway shows, but 100% included an older model. In fashion speak, older is definitely defined as merely over 30. But, said Alexandra Van Hout, the founder and chief executive of Tagwalk, what we're really seeing is that brands are increasingly embracing models with visible signs of age, such as gray hair or wrinkles, signifiers that tend to appear closer to the 50-year-old mark. And not just on the runway. At Celine, the designer Michael Ryder invited 77-year-old Joan Julie Buck, the French Vogue editor turned Substacker, actor, and radio host, to sit in front and center for the show, along with the 50-somethings Naomi Watts, Sarah Paulson, and Tracy Ellis Ross. At Lowe, Jack McCullough said Lázaro Hernandez's star guest list included 76-year-old Sissy Spacek, making her first appearance at Paris Fashion Week. Age has become something brands seem genuinely proud to highlight, Ms. Van Hout said. Even beyond the runway, a movement has burgeoned in the fashion or fashion adjacent people choose to emphasize, rather than erase, their age. The former supermodel and current Estee Lauder ambassador, Paulina Porizkova, 61, has been spearheading the discussion on Instagram, where she reveals her laugh lines and age-related weight gain in makeup-less photos and underwear videos to her 1.4 million followers. Joining her is Miss Buck, who posted a close-up bathroom mirror selfie before the most recent Celine show, captioned in part, "The face I never thought I would have." The shot, she said, inspired more positive feedback than pretty much anything else she has done. And then there is the recent discussion of menopause and perimenopause that has supercharged a new segment of the beauty market, and that is led by women like Ms. Watts, Halle Berry, and Gwyneth Paltrow. It's a striking shift in an industry that has long been famous for fetishizing youth, and it stands out in a world where viewers are inundated with images in which every sign of age, every wrinkle, hollow, age spot has been filled in, tightened, filtered, lifted, or otherwise erased. Speculating on the work someone has done, even someone in her early 30s, has become a parlor game everyone can play, and artificial intelligence has made constant modification and reinvention a part of our visual diet. There's a backlash brewing to the airbrushed age. There's a practical reality agencies in the industry have to face, that older women have the purchasing power to buy the stuff being presented, and they have a desire to see themselves and their lived experiences in these spaces, said Romy Gordon, a 52-year-old former model who returned to the catwalk a year ago. Ms. Gordon began modeling as a teenager in Jamaica in the early 1990s. She found some success, but her career never really took off, and she stopped after only a few years to finish college and then manage a modeling agency. A year ago, her partner died. A friend convinced her to step in front of the camera again. In September, she was booked for Dario Vitale's first and only Versace show. And in January, she walked the Chanel Couture runway, followed by the Chanel Ready to Wear show. Now she said she is having her best season ever, and she isn't alone. We recently scouted a woman who was over 60 in the supermarket in the countryside outside Paris because we're seeing more of an uprise in demand for older models, said Talisa Carling, the director of IMG Models. The currently popular term, or euphemism, for such mature models is, she said, generational. Pointedly, when Piero Paolo Piccioli, the creative director of Balenciaga, was trying to cast a broad spectrum of people for his most recent show in Paris. He said it was easier to find older models than plus-size ones. 2 years ago, it was common to see the girls with different shaped bodies, he said. Now it's over. This year, I had to fly them in. Even though economists have been talking for decades about the power of what is referred to as the silver dollar or the gray market, fashion has generally given the idea short shrift in its public-facing initiatives. Until now. The reality is that half of the spending power is in the 50-plus cohort, and half of the growth in spending power is in the 50-plus cohort, said Gemma Dauria, the global co-leader of the fashion, luxury, and specialty retail practice at the McKinsey consulting firm. At a time when the growth of luxury has slowed or stalled, ignoring a major consumer group is simply not good strategy. Indeed, according to the Federal Reserve, more than 70% of all the wealth in the United States is concentrated in the over 55 age group, which is also responsible for more than 45% of consumer spending. This is reflected in part in what Ashley Mears, a model turned professor of sociology at the University of Amsterdam and the author of Pricing Beauty, The Making of a Fashion Model, called the new visibility of older women in public. See, for example, Martha Stewart on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 81, or Demi Moore at 61 on the awards circuit for her role in The Substance. Yet Ms. Mears said it's a paradox because they don't look their age. For women who are successful in their fields and need to be visible, which usually happens later in life, the message is you need to do work to look good. And that's expensive. Connecting youth with class and wealth and creating further barriers to entry at a time when fashion needs to take them down. That may be why Matthew Blasi, the artistic director of Chanel, said he felt it was important that when it came time for the models in his Chanel show, we didn't change their looks or try to make them younger. He wanted his message to be more, come as you are. Ms. Gordon, who has not had any cosmetic work other than facials, said this approach was common across her shows. They don't want to put any makeup on me, she said. I'm grateful they think my skin is in good condition, but a little eyelash won't kill anybody. Mr. Piccioli added, we all want to show powerful women, even in their vulnerability, and pride in showing your age is a symbol of strength and power. To cover that up or disguise it is to subvert the very idea fashion is now supposedly selling. Fashion has had moments of embracing age. In 2024, Bat Shivahay put on a show featuring only women over 40, and Oliver Rootstein sprinkled his Balmain runways with mature models. White-haired models like Carmen Del Orfis and Mae Musk have had long careers. This time around, the consensus is that the phenomenon may signal systemic change. I don't actually think it's a trend, Ms. Carling of IMG said. I think it's structural. In part, this may be because embracing at least some of the realities of age is a relatively easy way for fashion to demonstrate its awareness of the wider world. Age inclusivity is a relatively safe space for fashion because it doesn't challenge the core aesthetic, which is around a relatively thin model, said Emily Huggard, an associate professor at Parsons School of Design and co-director of its Size Inclusion in Fashion Lab. Size inclusivity demands a more structural change around production. But this is about more than just money. Ms. Buck started acting again when she was in her 50s, after a career as a writer and editor of French Vogue. She was cast as a French culinary school administrator in the 2009 film Julie and Julia, after which she said, one of the producers came over and said, "It's so great you haven't done anything to your face. You're going to get so much work because that's so rare." More common, at least in public, is the message coming from influencers and celebrities, where being transparent about your cosmetic work has become a trend in itself. Consider 70-year-old Kris Jenner, who told Vogue that her new facelift, the one that made her look almost the same age as her daughters, was her version of aging gracefully. "There's always two poles in any movement," Miss Buck said. "There's this pull towards being post-human, shinier, newer, cloned, etc. The sense that people have elevated the lacquered surface of the machine over the body. On the other hand," she said, "there's a corresponding pull towards I'm real. I think we're like old stone houses," she continued. "We have the value of antiquity. If you haven't tweaked yourself, it's like you have a working fireplace that's been going since 1680. We're authentic." Authenticity is, of course, one of the current buzzwords, not just in fashion, but in culture in general. It's a reflection of the fear that individual style has been lost to the algorithm. Everything is so overdone and velvety and well-arranged because of Instagram culture, where everyone lives in the same apartment with the same chair, that being yourself became the ultimate luxury, Mr. Blase said. He felt a hunger, he said, for difference. It's not just influencers and celebrities who have become the vehicles for this version of ageless sameness. It's political figures, too. And there, the trend is even more fraught. As many MAGA women have embraced the plumped and smoothed Mar-a-Lago face, it has become an expression of a larger social swing towards exaggerated norms and old-fashioned patriarchal gender roles, rather than simply a cosmetic fad. Ms. Buck put it this way: "For all women, there's that line between choosing to be malleable and pleasing and to conform with the collective norms or refusing it. More and more," she said, "they are saying, no, I am not playing that game." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. He reinvented the hoodie. Good luck getting one. Jake Burt sells his wares at a single shop that he staffs himself, stoking interest through scarcity. By Jacob Gallagher. Jake Burt knows it's hard to get his clothes. He wishes it were easier. It won't be anytime soon. Mr. Burt's clothes, like winsome riffs on Dickies-style work jackets and a Fair Isle cardigan with a hood in a leopard motif that would tickle Zsa Zsa Gabor, are available only at Jake's, his snug shop off Victoria Park in London. Oh, and it's open only on Saturdays from 11 to 6. To buy a Jake's garment, you have to buy it from Jake himself. "Nothing feels better than selling something," said Mr. Burt, 34. If he's a designer by trade, he's a shopkeeper by blood. Mr. Burt's parents are restless business people who throughout his young life ran market stalls around Somerset in the south of England. He gets a thrill from hand-to-hand commerce. "It's not the money," Mr. Burt said. "It's that someone will pay you for it." Mr. Burt has staged pop-ups in Tokyo and New York, but they are infrequent. A few months ago, he told me he would open a pop-up in New York in February. February became April, which became May. "I'm a really disorganized person," Mr. Burt said. But he is an exquisite designer. Mr. Burt's clothes have a thrifted quality, like something you'd find in the nosebleed section of your parents' closet and think, wait, when was my dad cool? It's almost like if you took Patagonia or the North Face and merged it with Margiela, said Brian Malloy, a stylist who owns sweaters and jackets from Mr. Burt. There's this sportiness there, but it's conceptually redone. Cardigans, 450 British pounds, or about $608, are produced in London, not far from Mr. Burt's shop. His aptly named horse jackets, 595 pounds, or about $804, are assembled by hand, like mosaic backsplashes, from disused nylon horse blankets that he buys from British laundries. "You don't know how long that green jacket's going to last," Mr. Malloy said. "It gives the pieces a sense of urgency." The central quirk of many Jake's pieces is the contrasting hood, like a Roman candle shoved onto a birthday cake. His nylon zip jackets brandish hoods in schoolboy stripes. A felted purple zip-up, £495, or about $672, comes with a flamingo pink hood. But the inaccessibility of what Mr. Burt creates is really what's central to its appeal. Clothes shopping today is a game of online ease and next-day shipping. We take for granted how effortless it is to acquire the clothes we want. Mr. Burt's approach is a less hospitable throwback. A shop run by a single person who functions as designer, cashier, and custodian. Jake's is more 1976 than 2026. When everything isn't so easily accessible, that's the best part, said Nick Tran, the head of buying at Dover Street Market in Paris, who owns several items from Mr. Burt. Mr. Tran said he hadn't tried to persuade Mr. Burt to sell his line at Dover Street. It would ruin the mystique. You can't recreate moments when Mr. Burt mixes you a martini or passes you a cardigan off the rack, or you run into a friend as you try it on. It's his own thing that needs to stay its own thing, Mr. Tran said. Still, people don't like to be told they can't buy something. Would-be shoppers turn snippy when Mr. Burt informs them that he has no online store. The comments on his Instagram are sprinkled with pleas for him to ship them a jacket. It's frustrating when you're in New York and you're trying to get something from London, said Maisie Willoughby, the chief marketing officer at Timberland. When Mr. Burt hosted a pop-up in New York last year, Ms. Willoughby purchased multiple items, including a white cardigan with a leopard hood that she said was everyone's favorite. Mr. Burt hears his customers' frustrations. They bum him out, and he does hope to open a simple online shop soon, but he isn't making any promises. After all, Jake's isn't even the only label he runs. For the past 8 years, he has been an owner of the British fashion label Stephen Cook. Mr. Burt and Stephen Cook, the man, have been romantic partners for 14 years and creative partners for more than half of that. They graduated together from the master's program at Central St. Martin's, the Arts and Design College in London. Mr. Cook studied textile design while Mr. Burt studied women's wear. When Mr. Cook won the annual H&M Design Award for his graduate collection, netting about €50,000, roughly $58,000, the pair agreed that Mr. Burt would help Mr. Cook get his label going. I was tired of education at that point, and I was so ready to not have to put my name on something, Mr. Burt said. Today, Stephen Cook operates as respectable a business as an independent fashion label can hope for. It's stocked online at Sense and in Tokyo at Dover Street Market. Timothée Chalamet and Robin have worn pieces from the label. Yet over the years, the cost of making clothes has crept up, forcing the pair to reflect that in their prices. Mr. Burt began to feel a disconnect between the person we were designing for and a person who could afford it. On a trip to Tokyo in 2024, as he wove around cubbyhole boutiques selling clothes and doodads he couldn't find anywhere else, he began to see a pathway for a different sort of business, one tethered to craft rather than to the catwalk. By skirting wholesale markup, his clothes could be moderately more affordable. Mr. Burt opened Jake's in November 2024, dusting off ideas he had long been sitting on. The leopard hood, derived from a real leopard muff he bought for 10 quid at a London flea market, was a nod to his mother. "Leopard's the one trashy thing she likes," he said. The rugby stripes reflect his obsession with the look of sports. The Jake's logo is a hand-drawn riff on the logo of the St. Louis Blues hockey team, with a J wedged in. While many clothing designers say they just want to make clothes they'd wear, Mr. Burt doesn't own a single item he has designed. "I've chosen things a couple of times, and then I'll wear it to the store and someone's like, 'Oh, but that's the one I want,'" he said. So he took the knit off his back and sold it. He'd rather have the sale than the sweater. Mr. Burt has landed himself in an unlikely realm, that of hype. Streetwear news accounts post about his clothes. 3 separate designers I know of, one in New York, one in New Delhi, and one in Paris, own Mr. Bert's clothes. During his travels to Japan, customers have taken photos with him. With 2 brands, I wondered if Mr. Bert felt his time was strained. I'd love to have a bit more of a team, like a design team, so I can make a bigger range, said Mr. Bert, who is prototyping jeans, shoes, and a leather bag right now. Mostly, he dreams of outposts in New York and Tokyo, where he can meet shoppers and see how they light up when they try on a sweater. Each would have a bed, he said, so that wherever I go between them, I can just stay in my own little shop. That eyeliner makes you look so millennial. In contrast to Gen Z's clean girl aesthetic, the cat eye of yesteryear has become a generational signifier. By Jessica Roy. They say you can spot a millennial by their self-presentation. Skinny jeans, ankle boots, and tucked-in tops are a dead giveaway that someone was born between 1981 and 1996, at least according to a certain online breed of Generation Z. And while some trends popular in the millennial heyday have seen a recent resurgence, Junko jeans, Sex in the City, and photo dumps are all on the up and up, one feature appears to be a millennial signifier: heavy winged eyeliner. When Ilka Sipos, a 29-year-old content creator, posted a video of herself on TikTok asking her 22-year-old sister if people could tell she was 7 years older, her sister's answer, and that of thousands of commenters, was a resounding yes. But only because of her eyeliner. Blunt, thick, and flicked upward. Maybe it's the cat's eye, as her younger sister puts it in the video. I didn't expect it to go as viral as it did, Miss Sipos said of her video, which was received well over 3 million views and has reinvigorated the millennial eyeliner debate. Never when I was doing my makeup did it occur to me that my eyeliner is dated. I just like how it looks. The upward angled elongated wing shape, created with a jet black liquid liner, has become a makeup signature of Miss Sipos's generation. Popularized by millennial celebrities like Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande, it rose to prominence in 2010s before giving way to the more natural look favored by members of younger generations. Gen Z is very clean girl aesthetic, said Erica Taylor, a makeup artist and social media influencer who specializes in midlife makeup. I feel like they don't even necessarily wear eyeliner. It's just a glowy lid and mascara. While Miss Taylor believes winged eyeliner is very indicative of a millennial, she said she also describes such application as a timeless trend that has endured through the decades, from Cleopatra to Audrey Hepburn to Taylor Swift to Selena Gomez. The writer, Zahara Hankir, said that while researching her 2023 book, Eyeliner: A Cultural History, she noticed the generational eyeliner debate starting to take shape on social media. I came across TikToks where Gen Z influencers joked that you can spot a millennial by the angle or shape of their wing, much like the side part or skinny jeans, she added. It's really just another example of how quickly beauty trends become generational markers. Ms. Hankir said the generational differences over eyeliner are nothing new and have long existed across different regions and time periods. In the 1960s, for example, younger women embraced bold, graphic liner as part of a wider cultural shift, she wrote in an email. In regions like the Middle East and North Africa, kohl has been used for centuries, but its application has evolved across generations under different social and cultural influences. For example, younger women in cities may turn to Western or liquid formulations of eyeliner, while older generations in rural areas may continue to use traditional kohl. While Ms. Sipos said that she was going to expand her repertoire to include Gen Z version of a cat eye, light, thin, and less extended, she won't abandon millennial eyeliner entirely. This is how I've always done my makeup, and it's probably how I'm going to continue to do my makeup, she said. Her younger sister, Maya Sipos, said in an interview that she would also wear winged eyeliner, but would stick to the thinner, more Gen Z version. For the elder Sipos, keeping up with trends is fun, but not as important as staying true to herself. It's most important to do what's fitting for each individual, she said. At the end of the day, the millennial cat eye, it's a pretty iconic look, she added. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Social cues. My sister excluded me from our family holiday. Help! By Philip Galanes. My sister hosts most family holiday gatherings, having taken over from our elderly mother. My wife and I live far away, but for 20 years we have made a genuine effort to attend. Still, we often decline because of the distance. My sister has long expressed resentment over our absences. She lays guilt trips on us when we say no, and the tension is heavy when we attend. This Easter, we were not invited at all. When I asked my mother about it, she suggested I call my sister if I wanted to come. But I can't bring myself to ask to be invited. That would reinforce our guilt-based dynamic where I'm responsible for her resentment. And I don't believe it would improve our relationship. Is it reasonable to step away from these gatherings? Brother. I receive a lot of letters like yours. Like you, many of us are quick to assert our blamelessness and to accuse the other person of bad behavior. Here, the bad behavior includes your sister's guilt trips and unfair exclusion of you. And no matter how long a conflict lasts, years in this case, letter writers rarely report having spoken to the other person directly about the problem. The reason? They claim to know the outcome of these conversations before they even happen. Nothing will improve, you say. Now, I suspect you, mostly, believe this story. But the fact that you are writing to a stranger about this impasse suggests to me that you're worried your sister may have some claim. Perhaps, for instance, she resents the physical and emotional labor of hosting family holidays year after year. I would. Just because you live at a distance is no reason not to pitch in occasionally. So I come back to your mother's sage advice. Call your sister. But not to convince her that you're right and she's dysfunctional. Ask her what's bugging her, and then listen patiently. If she has no reasonable complaint, as you suspect, assure her that you would love to be there if it weren't for the long holiday drive. Or she may have something interesting to say, but you will never know until you call. For help with your awkward situation, send a question to socialq@nytimes.com. Modern love. Painting over my painful past. My father treated me more like a wife than a child. It took me decades to face the truth of what happened. By Sarah Hansen. 2 years ago, I packed up several of my father's abstract expressionist paintings and dropped them off with a handful of visual artists to be painted over. This was my solution to a problem that had haunted me all my life. I was born in Manhattan in 1976. Before I was 2, my mother left my father and me to be a road manager for a popular folk band, and she never returned as a full-time mother. In her absence, I was raised by my father, an artist with a Brooklyn accent as thick as his beard. We lived in his painting studio in Carroll Gardens with a spirit of anything goes. We roller skated over the uneven floorboards as a disco ball cast its magic over the loft walls. My half-siblings from my father's first marriage sometimes crashed with us as they started their adult lives, but mostly it was just my father and me. The laughs and alcohol were abundant. But mixed with the music, frequent house guests, and as many Star Wars figures as I could ask for, was the secret presence of my father's hand between my legs. Though he died in 2012 at the age of 76, it has taken me decades to come to terms with the less artful things that happened in that home. For most of my adult life, I had chosen to live as if at night in his bed he hadn't treated me as he might treat a wife. Long before I went through puberty or understood that any of it was wrong. As I began to admit the truth, I was struck by a revulsion so strong it threatened to bring down the walls of my carefully constructed fantasy life. A few years ago, in my late 40s, I decided I could no longer live my life as if none of this had happened. When I researched the common symptoms of an incest survivor, chronic traumatic neurosis, personal relationship imbalances, and increased intergenerational risk of abuse, I realized why I didn't want to accept that this was me. Pretending the abuse didn't happen was an easier route. Incest was too taboo, too stigmatizing. Even as a child, I was aware of this shame. My father referred to our bond as so precious and private that no one would ever understand. When I spent time with my mother, she somehow ignored my obvious signs of distress. Nightmares, anxiety, blood in my underwear. Everyone around me acted as if this wasn't happening, so I did too, and I strove to live a normal life, graduating at the top of my class, earning my Master of Fine Arts in Film, and becoming an academic like my father before I was 25. At the same time, I tried to build a family with someone whose background was the opposite of mine, a man from a large religious family in the suburbs. I hoped that he would show me the way to a healthy life. But even after having 3 children together, we remained distant and detached, and we divorced when our youngest child was 2. I had 2 significant relationships after, but neither stuck. My constant struggles in love forced me to confront my loneliness and inability to feel close to a romantic partner. And I realized I had better try to heal from this trauma if I ever wanted to experience real love. The first step: live my life as if my memories were true. Stop promoting the myth of my happy childhood. Removing the constant reminder of my father in the form of his paintings was an obvious place to start, but it felt as harsh as ripping a favorite blankie away from a sleeping baby. I had never known a time when my father's art had not surrounded me with its uneven lines and overlapping geometric shapes. His style of abstraction, a holdover of the 50s, had dissipated by the 70s. Even as I packed for college, I chose 5 of his paintings to hang in my dorm as proof of my creative bohemian upbringing. When I met new people, I took a certain pride in my preferred childhood narrative. I had managed without a consistent, loving mother because I'd had my wacky artistic father. My father loved to point out that he devoted his life to me and to his work in that order, and I loved to repeat it. Our life was full of other artists, some of whom became lifelong mentors. I believed in his talent with the blind faith of a child. When I became an experimental filmmaker, I hoped to be like him, surrounded by inspiring people, creating and teaching for a living. This narrative calmed me. Once I admitted the abuse, however, the dozens of artworks that I had carried with me for years became something new, the glaring evidence of denial. I couldn't stand to look at them any longer. But what should I do? Burn them? Paint them black? The first painting I took down, a canvas the size of a window with mushy marks that blurred shades of pink, gray, and green, had been in my bedroom. I didn't love all my father's artwork, but this was a favorite I had hung in a place of prominence wherever I lived. Its muted swirls loom in the background of countless photos from potlucks I hosted in my 20s. They even enlivened the photo of my husband at the time, holding our first child, after we returned from the hospital. I dropped it off with an artist friend and said goodbye when I handed it over. I asked her to return it to me as a new work of art. Her studio was lush and vibrant, the opposite of my father's sparse loft, which felt right. She welcomed the assignment. Not every artist was as enthusiastic. Interestingly, all who expressed discomfort were men who worried about how they would feel if someone painted over their art. I tried not to be bothered by their apparent empathy for my father. Their art was everything to them, and it pained them to picture their babies being damaged. To be clear, this was not like painting over any other kind of art. My father had been a working artist his whole life, but not a successful one. His work was not widely shown or sold in galleries. His entire archive belonged to various members of my family. Most of the resistors came around when I explained that I was the owner of these objects and free to do whatever I wanted with them. If I didn't want them on my walls, was I required to pay for the storage of these canvases forever? While the artist worked on the paintings, I worked on myself, beginning therapy with a trauma specialist, journaling, practicing somatic work, and guided meditation. I tried every treatment and alternative therapy I could find for incest survivors. The effort felt harder and more exhausting than any of my 3 pregnancies. I felt nauseated, unable to eat, racked by shame and fear that I had opened a terrible line of inquiry into the past that no one wanted to hear about. Slowly, though, I began to regain my footing, in time to receive the art that has been returning to my home, often unrecognizable, and always for the better. I was nervous with anticipation, afraid that I had set an impossible expectation. Picking up a canvas from my friend Chris Now, I found that what was once a minimalist rectangle of black paint with one blue line had been transformed into an oval-shaped burst of color. Chris hadn't achieved this by painting over my father's work. He had unearthed it by chipping away at the layers of paint, bending and crumpling the canvas to reveal bright oranges and yellows. He then put the canvas on a round stretcher, no edges, and titled it Brave Child. The process reminded me of the Japanese art of kintsugi, in which broken pottery is often repaired to highlight the damage. 2 years in, my walls and closets are overflowing with these new works of art. When I began this process, I worried that I was destroying what was, in my mind, my father's only worthwhile legacy. Now, after repeating my story in dozens of artist studios, I can finally claim the truth about my past while living in the present, if uncomfortably most of the time. I wanted to shatter the lies about my childhood and embrace a new story, one where 2 things could be true. My father may have helped me make me into the artist I became, but I no longer need his art to remind me of that. I need new art, made with love, to show me what's possible. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 19th issue of the New York Times Style section. Your reader has been Laura. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 3 of We Did Okay Kid by Sir Anthony Hopkins. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, broadcasting daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Readings broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Radio Reading's website is nfradioreading.org. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles